He's a writer for the 1828 website, director of the Centre think tank, and Torrin left the Lib Dems fairly recently. Torrin, thank you very much for your time this morning as the chair of Liberal Leave. Why did you firstly decide to leave the Liberal Democrats?
Well, I think there were a number of reasons for why I left. I mean, the big one is, of course, Brexit. And I felt that the party was very uncompromising over that. But also there is this toxic atmosphere within the Lib Dems towards people who voted Leave. And of course, I went off and decided that I wanted to start a think tank. So there were lots of things that pushed me out of the Lib Dems, but also pulled me away to do other things.
I mean, the Liberal Democrats have been known as a pro-European party for a very, very long time indeed. I imagine that being a Leaver in the Lib Dems is a bit like being a Remainer in the Brexit party, isn't it?
Not quite, because the Liberal Democrats have lots of other policies. And, of course, I joined during the coalition, and we were talking about everything. We were talking about the economy, we were talking about public services. And unfortunately, throughout my time as a Liberal Democrat, we have more and more gone towards this idea that we have to focus on the European Union, which really started when Nick Clegg debated Nigel Farage for the first time. And that really was a start of a change in the Liberal Democrats. I mean, there was actually a time when Ed Davey walked out of the House of Commons because the Speaker wouldn't allow time to debate a motion on having a referendum on EU membership. So it's not always been this case that Liberal Democrats have been very, very pro-EU. It's really a recent thing.
I don't think Ed Davey was seeking to have a referendum on our membership and then vote to leave, though.
No, but it was certainly offering the people a choice on the issue, which entails that they could vote one way or the other.
Sure.
So it's not, I think, something that the Lib Dems were pro-Brexit, but they were certainly more open to the idea.
You are presumably, well, you're a former member now, but I can't imagine that you are terribly approving of the new Lib Dem policy confirmed at conference yesterday to revoke Article 50 in the event of winning a majority.
No, not at all. I think the main issue with it is that we are trying to use the first-past-the-post voting system, which we have condemned and said that we should have a fairer system. We even had the alternative vote referendum during the coalition years to get rid of it. We are using that to overturn the referendum result, which was a fairer vote because each vote mattered the same amount. So I'm very much not happy, and I think it will also, it pushes two sides to the extremes. The Liberal Democrats are moving in the direction of just revoking Article 50. They've now gone there. And as well as that, the Brexit Party is on the side of having no deal whatsoever. So it's really just pushing the extreme sides of politics further away from each other.
Isn't that inevitable? It might not be desirable, but isn't it inevitable that the Lib Dems have to do this when they're faced with a Conservative Party that would also want to use first-past-the-post, arguably, to inflict a no-deal Brexit on the country?
I think that if you're trying to lead from the front and set an example of how things should be done, if the Lib Dems won an election, then they could go to the European Union, and I don't really see a situation in which the European Union says, we don't want you to have a second referendum, we won't grant you an extension. So if the Lib Dems win an election, they either have the choice to immediately revoke Article 50, or on the other hand say, let's put it to a referendum. They've now decided that they're just going to go through first past the post without asking the people again to say, we would like to just do this without your consent under an unfair voting system, without even trying to go for another referendum.
You, as someone who left the Lib Dems over their European policy, as someone who wanted to leave the European Union, would you nonetheless welcome a second referendum, which of course was Lib Dem policy until a couple of days ago? Is that something that you favoured?
I favoured it over revoking Article 50, but I feel that a second referendum on EU membership would not be very helpful because it's simply asking the question of membership again. And until we've actually negotiated the final deal, which will be when we are no longer EU members, we won't actually have an idea of what the eventual outcome will be. So I think actually the better step, the thing that I proposed, is to negotiate a deal with the European Union and then have a referendum between the deal and no deal, because the referendum answered the question of EU membership, and the next is to decide which route we take next.
So you would favour a referendum that could be a choice between a deal that no one likes, very similar perhaps to that which was rejected by the Commons 3 times on one hand, and the other option being no deal, which the more hardcore Brexiteers actually favour as an option. You'd be happy to have those as the two options on a future referendum?
In the end, it comes down to the fact that those are the options, that EU membership has been dealt with, and that we are left with the deal that's been negotiated. Obviously, Boris Johnson may end up with a slightly better deal than May. That's completely up for grabs on his side of things. But the no deal and the withdrawal agreement, those are the options ahead of us. Because we could add Remain in the mix, but of course that then goes back to asking the same question again, which at the end of the day has been answered already. There was a vote to leave the European Union. So I don't think going back there would help when we don't actually know fully what the alternative is. But of course that's actually down to the workings of Article 50, which is what the EU is going under, rather than it being something that I personally would like to be the situation.
The mandate, of course, to leave, you're right, it was clear, but it's now over 3 years old. And I just wonder if a significant number of people feel that the choice between a deal which might be assembled by Boris Johnson, which is nonetheless not very good, if the choice is between that and leaving with no deal at all, a lot of people might think, well, hang on, do we not have the right to choose whether we actually want to go through with this at all?
Well, I think the issue with having another referendum is suddenly referendum mandates essentially become fairly meaningless, because Leave voters aren't really going to turn out to a vote when they've already voted to leave the European Union and then have to do it again.
Why would they not? Why would they not? I mean, if this is such a fundamental issue, why would they sit on their hands a second time round?
Because the last referendum said the UK will leave the European Union. So this time they're being asked again, would you like to leave the European Union? And so I think a lot of them will think, actually, you know what? The politicians aren't going to listen to what I have to say on this issue. You know, we told them once, didn't do it. We'll have to tell them again. You know, they may not. But I think that the thing that will happen, there will be Leave voters who sit at home because they decide that politicians aren't interested in what they have to say. And it's something that I keep hearing whenever I talk to Leave supporters, which is this general feeling that politicians don't want to listen to them. And I don't think that's going to get better if you ask them the same question again.
You clearly don't like the decision the Liberal Democrats have made to unilaterally revoke Article 50 if they win a majority. But I wonder whether you think it is going to be electorally popular. You might need to answer this question through gritted teeth, but do you think it will win votes for the Lib Dems?
It's a really difficult one because, on the one hand, it alienates some groups. I know a lot of people in the South East who were soft Brexit supporters who now can't support the Liberal Democrats because they thought they were getting another referendum and now won't. There are those people who did want a second referendum and now can't support them. And there are even some Leavers who would just about accept another vote on EU membership. So there are lots of groups that immediately go away and wouldn't vote Liberal Democrats. But whether or not they can make that up, it looks like they probably will. But again, I think this is a case of dividing the country more than it is of electoral success. They may win an election, but they will divide the country further.
Because it's hard to imagine that a policy change like this hasn't at least seen someone run the numbers beforehand to get a sense of whether this will be a net electoral benefit.
Yeah, no, I would definitely not expect it to be one that has been done without elections in mind, but in some ways that's partly the worry. I think it's more to do with elections than it actually is to do with what is the right thing to do. I think the Lib Dems saw an opportunity and they saw Labour moving towards a second referendum, which has pushed them now further to establish themselves as a party of being against Brexit. You know, they had the chance before the referendum of going for something like a Norway-style deal, which I think would be my preferable option outside the EU. And instead of that, they went and they decided that rather than heal divisions, they were essentially going to push them further.
All right, Torrin, thank you. Torrin Wilkins, chair of Liberal Leave, writer for the 1828 website and director of the Centre think tank. He recently left the Lib Dems over their Brexit position.